Testing, testing, testing.
Testing! Ah!
Can you hear me? You know what? I'm gonna go ahead and remove this. There we go. It can breathe once more. Alright, so welcome back to another review. This time we're going to be comparing the Sennheiser HD560S against the HiFiMAN Sundara. Both of these being a quote-unquote budget entry in both of the company's lineups. So a lot of you have been requesting this particular comparison for quite some time. Understandably so. They fall within a similar category of sound, but not quite the same price bracket. So, are the Sundaras worth the extra money? Do these two differ enough to justify owning both? Now before we jump in, do me a quick favor and do the deeds down below. You know what to do. I really appreciate it. Okay, let's not waste any more time. Let's get into it. Now as far as the contents are concerned, you actually get better contents with a more affordable option here. Included with the HD560S is a very long rubber cable with a twist lock 2.5mm tip ring sleeve plug on the headphone end and a 1/4 inch tip ring sleeve plug on the amp end. Also included is a 1/4 inch female to 3.5mm tip ring sleeve adapter. With the Sundaras you get this very short cable with dual 3.5mm tip ring sleeve plugs on the headphone end and a 90-degree 3.5mm tip ring sleeve plug on the other end. Stupid Sundara cable. It also comes with a 3.5mm to 1/4 inch adapter, but I happened to purchase this pair of Sundaras pre-owned and they work brilliantly, they work excellently, but you know, it didn't come with a 3.5, so can't really show that on screen, but it's a standard. You've seen it before. So now let's jump into the build quality. Now the difference between each headphone's build is significantly different from the ground up. With the Sennheisers, you get a build made up entirely of plastic from the cups to the headband to the grills. Even though this makes it sound like a flimsy headphone, I assure you that it feels really solid for what it's working with. I can easily bend this to my will and modify the headband's clamp force as I see fit, or at least try to. Granted, you may want to refrain from doing anything too risky just to be safe. Now the part of the headband that touches your head, as well as the ear pads, are made of velour. It's the type of velour that feels less than soft to the touch, but feels more acceptable on your head. They also feature a single-sided headphone design. So the Sundaras are a textbook example of an antithesis. They're made entirely of metal, with the exception of the inner headband, the headband adjustment mechanism, and the ear pads. Unlike the Sennheisers, which feature a traditional headband design, the Sundaras feature a bungee type of headband design. Now the inner headband is made of pleather, while the ear pads are a hybrid design that feature a knit material on the parts that make contact with your head and pleather on the sides that don't. Also, they feature a dual-sided cable design. Now, I will mention that the Sennheisers have more horizontal play with the cup's rotation, while the Sundaras basically have all of the vertical play you might possibly need. And now let's approach the comfort department. Definitely giving this one to the Sundaras here. Definitely am. See, it's strange. When you first put on the Sennheisers, it feels a little snug, but perfect. As time goes by, the clamp force really starts to kick in and keeps going. So I personally can't wear these for listening sessions longer than an hour and a half, tops. The Sundaras are a totally different story, however. At first, they feel a little snug on your head. This quickly approaches a level of approximately 30% discomfort, give or take. After that, however, they just stay at that same level of discomfort for hours and hours on end. It's a positive compromise, in my honest opinion. You'd think that having a plastic build and taller cups would give the Sennheiser some sort of advantage, right? Apparently not. So now let's talk about amplification. The HD560S boasts an impedance level of 120 ohms and a sensitivity level of 110 decibels. The HiFiMAN Sundara boasts an impedance level of 37 ohms and a sensitivity level of 94 decibels. While you totally can run both of these off of a smartphone or some other low-powered device, I highly recommend running both of these off of an amp to achieve their full potential, especially the Sundaras. So on the THX AAA 789, I run the HD560S at around 11 AM on gain 2 and around 9 AM on gain 3. I run the Sundaras at around 12:30 p.m. on gain 2 and around 10:30 a.m. on gain 3. So as you can see, sensitivity level really makes a difference in how much power will be required to properly push a headphone. And now the sound portion of this review. Just a quick FYI, the following tests were all performed at stock frequencies. No EQ was applied to this whatsoever. We'll discuss EQ later in the notes and observations portion of this review though. Now with that out of the way, let's begin. So let's start off with the bass. It is tough, and I mean tough, to declare a winner here. Bass guitars on the HD560S are a tad softer and warmer. They're close to neutral, but they have a smoother response. Now on the Sundaras, they have a slight bit of elevation going on, not enough to call them forward, but there is a difference there. They also have more growl to them, especially on the lower end of the bass guitar's range. Surprisingly, the HD560S actually reach a little lower into the sub-bass response than the Sundaras do, which is funny since it tends to be the other way around when it comes to dynamic drivers versus planars. So let me go ahead and draw this out for you real quick. Let's pretend, based off of what I hear alone, that the two headphone sub-bass responses look like this. You'll notice that the Sundara's roll-off is actually steeper than the HD560S's more gradual curve. Around the mid-bass area, the Sundaras definitely have more heft and presence to them, but there does come a certain point within the sub-bass area where this crossover occurs and notes become more forward on the HD560S. This actually becomes quite evident when it comes to the electronic bass and some points within Zealots of Stockholm by Childish Gambino. At the minute 35 mark, the HD560S produced a well-extended and clean response. The Sundaras reach down there about equally as well, but deliver a warmer and more forward response. Like it's way more in your face. While you can clearly hear the response on both headphones, you can really feel it on the Sundaras. Like it really is undeniable. Though at the 3:05 minute mark, the Sundaras produce a more powerful response, and then it just disappears. The HD560S, on the other hand, gradually fade away, then disappear a little less suddenly. Now let's approach the mid section. Female vocals sound a tad more detailed and less shouty on the HD560S. Cellos sound a little more detailed as well, but they're also a tad more nasal. So a big example, Tank by the Seatbelts. The chaka-chaka of the guitar strings on the right, as well as the maracas on the left, sounded more natural and clear on the HD560S, while sounding a bit more forward and hyped on the Sundaras. Now the general instrument sounded quite clear and accurate on the HD560S. The Sundaras gave a little bit of a forward tilt to lower brass instruments, and then gave them a little extra dominance and warmth. Instruments within the mids region seem to have more body on the Sundaras. They do sound a bit more colored. However, that little extra coloration personally made them sound a bit more enjoyable to me. Now for that sweet, sweet treble. The HD560S possesses a slightly elevated but generally smooth treble response as a whole. In contrast, the Sundaras are quite similar in the lower and mid treble, but do possess a couple of treble spikes around the higher treble. So this generally affects instruments like cymbals and hi-hats. There are many cases where this particular difference can be heard clearly, but a really indisputable difference is in Thunder Horse by Deathclock. So throughout most of the track, you can clearly hear a sound in the background that reminds me of two coins rubbing up against each other. While you can clearly hear it and feel it in the back of your throat on the HD560S, this becomes far more apparent on the Sundaras. Seriously, it feels like those two coins are aggressively rubbing up against the inside of where your neck and chin meet. And for those of us who are currently suffering from work from home syndrome, that would be your lowest chin. So to jump into another quick example, Bangarang by Skrillex featuring Syra. The Sundaras have a bit more of a sizzle and metallic cling to the high end, though it rarely ever gets fatiguing. Although it does this to a lesser extent, the sibilance region somehow manages to be as forward as possible without introducing any sort of immediate fatigue either. The HD560S, on the other hand, seemed to possess a little more energy around that sibilance region, though with a less metallic timbre. But everything after that is much smoother and less forward by comparison. So now let's talk about that soundstage and imaging. There's really not much to discuss here actually. They're about equal in terms of soundstage width, which is like about medium to narrow, closer to the medium side of things. Though the Sundaras do possess a little extra bit of imaging capabilities, it's not a night and day difference, but when you have them side by side, you do hear that extra little bit of refinement in the Sundaras. Now for some quick notes and observations right before the conclusion. I did mention we would discuss the consequences of applying EQ to each headphone. Although I am generally not a fan of EQ because it can erase the characteristics that make a headphone stand out, it can also erase the flaws that also make a headphone stand out, if that makes any sense. With the HD560S, there really aren't a whole lot of issues to talk about. Therefore, these particular EQ settings are simply meant to increase bass extension, tame that slightly shouty mid-region, and chill-pillize the treble region as a whole, if that makes any sense. Now with the Sundaras, there are a few regions that I don't personally see as problems per se, but definitely can be slightly modified to reduce them. As you can see, these particular settings simply provide a little extra rumble in the sub bass, a little extra presence in the mids, and slightly bring down that peak in the upper treble. So both adjustments made are very slight and do not entirely remove those characteristics. That is completely intentional. They're just meant to reel it in a bit, just a little bit. Now, one particular advantage that the HD560S have over the Sundaras is the fact that you'll be able to use them with a tube amplifier, such as the Dark Voice 336 SE, should you choose to do so. Now, if you'd like to know about my particular experience with this particular pairing, check the link in the description or click on the upper right portion of the screen to check that out. So to conclude, on paper, the Sundaras and HD560S sound like they appeal to a very similar demographic. That is true, generally speaking. However, once you start digging into the details, you notice that they definitely possess some minuscule differences that can make you choose one over the other, depending on your use case and preferences. So if you're looking for the smoothest, most neutral option for professional use, get the HD560S. If you're looking for a very natural sound with deep bass extension and minimal sibilance, get the HD560S. But if you're looking for a relatively neutral sound with a little more hype and excitement, get the Sundaras. If you're very particular about comfort and have a large head, get the Sundaras. Now, it's tough for me to tell you to keep both since their sound characteristics fall within a very similar category, though I honestly can't choose between one and the other when it comes to sound quality. Now, perhaps this is just a reflection of my hoarder type of personality, but I find myself reaching for them about equally. Though in the end, the comfort that the Sundaras offer outweighs the smoothness and neutrality of the HD560S. For me, at least. Well, I really hope this video helped you out. Don't forget links in the description for both of these. If you want to help me out that way, just click on it and you buy, and that's all you got to do. If you were planning on buying these in the first place, I'd go ahead and appreciate that. But yeah, it's gonna go ahead and do it for me. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.